truth is, we the people knew all along what Big Pharma was trying to do. That's why we didn't listen to a single word they had to say. And with this new Project Veritas video coming out, we knew what they really wanted to do behind the scenes. Also in the news, the Biden administration says that it will end the quote COVID emergency in May. And finally, HBO glorifies the MAID program, the program that helps you die. Without further ado, let's begin. My name is Demetrius Arujo, and you're watching The Demetrius Arujo Show.
I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast, I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.
We already knew that Big Pharma, aka Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, all have so many things to hide, it's not even funny. But Project Veritas is yet again right on point with a brand new video investigating this very thing. They put their undercover reporter online for us to see. So let's watch their newest video here.
Pfizer ultimately is thinking about mutating COVID?
Well, that is not what we say to the public. No, don't tell anyone this. You probably don't tell anyone. You probably don't tell anyone. Okay? We're exploring, like, now, you know how the virus keeps mutating?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is, like, why don't we just mutate it ourselves so we can create undeveloped develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that, though, there's a risk of, like, as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses.
Oh yeah, exactly what he said. So yes, it's one thing to say, oh wait, you're recording somebody that doesn't know that they're being recorded. You're recording somebody that's undercover. This isn't fair. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We know for a fact that this person, Jordan Tristan Walker, this is the director of research and development at Pfizer. Okay, he works in the strategic operations and mRNA scientific planning. So if he really does not want this getting out, why would he tell this random stranger he's on a date with? It just doesn't make any sense. Moving on with the video, let's continue.
You have to be, like, very controlled to make sure that this virus that you mutate doesn't create something that, like, you know, it goes everywhere.
Something crazy.
Is the way that the virus started and moving on. To be honest, like, it makes no sense if this virus popped out of nowhere. Like,
yeah, I know.
Meet Jordan Tristan Walker, a director of research and development strategic operations and mRNA scientific planning at Pfizer.
It sounds like gain of function to me.
I don't know, it's a little bit different. I think it's different. It's like, it's definitely not gain of function.
It sounds like it is. I mean, it's okay.
No, directed evolution is very different. Well, you're not supposed to do gain of function research with the viruses. Like,
yeah.
They recommend not. But you do, like, these, like, selected directional mutations to try to see if you can make more potent.
Yeah.
So there is research ongoing about that. I don't know how that's going to work. There not be any more outbreaks, because, like, Jesus Christ.
The gentleman seems to have...
Okay, so we're going to stop right there. So I already know, yes, people are going to forget, but I don't care. Listen, I don't care. We know the info within Pfizer because of this person. We know the info of what's happening within Pfizer because of this person coming out and saying it. Yes, it's behind the scenes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's behind the scenes. If you're going to implement these policies, if you're going to implement this in put it out to the public, like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine or the Pfizer vaccine or whatever vaccine, and then you're creating the virus that you're going to then solve, that's against the law. And that should be a lockup, a jailable offense, a punishable offense. And it is a punishable offense because now what you're doing is you're committing arson on your own people. You're killing your own people within the United States. So the government has to now step in because of this video and prosecute Pfizer for doing this. I mean, this is a really high up person within Pfizer, so he knows what he's talking about, so he's not lying. So with that being said, I don't know if anything's going to happen. Probably not. Nothing ever happens from these things that comes out because they're always like, oh no, you're a conspiracy theorist. No, we're not conspiracy theorists. We're realists. The difference between a conspiracy theory and reality is 2 to 3 months. Maybe a little bit longer, maybe a half a year. That's only 6 months, guys. Wait 6 months and you'll see. This is real. Pfizer's going to come out and they're going to do whatever they have to cover this and put it under the rug. They'll pay off these people. The media is obviously going to stand up for them. So Pfizer has nothing. Pfizer's not going anywhere, sadly. But with that being said, we're going to move into the next segment of the show, which is the headlines of the week. So, moving on with the first article, we have Biden administration admits that it will end COVID emergency in May in a letter telling Republicans not to end COVID emergency. Well, we don't need to wait till May to see this COVID emergency, this quote unquote COVID emergency is over and done with. It is over and done with, and it has been over and done with. So, going with the article, the Biden administration quietly admitted its plan to end COVID-19 emergency declarations Monday, 3 years after the start of the pandemic. In a statement of policy from the White House of Management and Budget, the White House admitted that it would file on the last extension of the national and public health emergency declarations on April 11th, then would end both 1 month later on May 11th. The memo comes in response to 2 bills in Congress that would force the end of these declarations. Quote, the COVID-19 National Emergency and Public Health Emergency, PHE, were declared by the Trump administration in 2020. OMB said in its statement, they are currently set to expire on March 1st and April 11th, respectively. At present, the administration's plan to extend the emergency declarations to May 11th and end both emergencies on the date. This wind down would align the administration's previous comments to give at least 60 days notice prior to the termination of PHE. To be clear, continuation of these emergency declarations until May 11th does not impose any restriction at all on individual conduct with regard to COVID-19, OMB continued. They do not impose mask mandates or vaccine mandates, and they do not restrict school or business operations. They do not require any of the use of medicines or tests in response to cases of COVID-19. But the policy was announced in a statement intended to criticize 2 bills in the House of Representatives that would end the emergency declarations by force. The first, H.R. 382, aka the Pandemic is Over Act, was introduced by Kentucky Republican Rep. Brett Guthrie. It would terminate the public health emergency. The second, House Joint Resolution 7, was authorized by Arizona Republican Rep. Paul Geuser. It would terminate the national emergency. In its statement, the White House railed against the 2 bills. First, the White House claimed that terminating the declaration would create chaos in the healthcare system. Ending the public health emergency would jeopardize Medicaid funding given to states by abruptly ending provisions passed by Congress, the OMB memo argued. Furthermore, the OMB argued that ending the emergency would create chaos in hospitals and nursing homes by doing away with flexibilities from the pandemic, because it's over. Of course, we're going to do away with these paying you thousands and thousands of dollars per month because you don't need it anymore. Disrupting care, delaying payments, and costing facilities money. Wow, it's almost like you need to pay money to run a business. Ending the emergency would also jeopardize telehealth services, the office claimed. Second, the end of the public health emergency will end Title 42, and the administration is trying to end that policy that allows border agents to turn migrants away on an expedited basis, but it was stopped by the Supreme Court, IFHR 382. It becomes law, and the Title 42 restrictions would end immediately. Congress will effectively be requiring the administration to allow thousands of migrants per day into the country immediately without the necessary policies in place, the memo argued. Okay, so here's the thing. How about you introduce another bill to turn away these migrants and say, listen, come through legally, or we're not going to allow you to come in at all. That's how you should come into a country. Quote, the administration strongly opposes enactment of H.R. 382 and H.J. Resolution 7, which would be a grave disservice to the American people, and the OMB concluded. The Biden administration has struggled to put forth a consistent message since President Joe Biden declared that, quote, the pandemic is over in a 60 Minutes interview in September. Last week, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre repeated that the pandemic is not over yet. COVID isn't over, and we've been very clear about that, Jean-Pierre said at a briefing Tuesday. Hundreds of Americans are dying every day, and the cases are increasing right now. That's why we take common sense measures like COVID testing ahead of large indoor gatherings at the White House. So the thing is that you want to introduce laws, you want to sit here and do whatever you want on your side, but then at the same exact time, you don't want Republicans to do anything when they get into the to Congress or the Supreme Court or whatever, what have you. The thing is that the pandemic is over. If you are relying on these COVID rules to actually get away with what you want to do, then no, you need to implement your own laws, because these temporary laws are temporary for a reason. They cannot stay here. Impose something else. You're the president, Joe Biden, in the Joe Biden administration. You're in the president's seat. How about you put your big boy hat on, your big boy pants? How about you go to the Senate and make a law for what you want to happen at the border? But of course, you're not going to do this. Moving on to the next article from the Daily Wire, which is the second headline of the week. We actually have Maricopa County announces investigation into election printer issues. Well, finally, Arizona's Maricopa County announced an investigation Friday into problems that plagued the 2022 election. Former Arizona Supreme Court Justice Ruth McGrader agreed to lead the independent endeavor, county's officials said on a statement. McGrader was a member of the state Supreme Court from 1998 to 2009. And participated in a 2019 investigation into security issues at Arizona's prisons. McGregor will hire a team of, quote, independent experts to find out why the printers that read ballots well on the August primary had trouble reading some ballots while using the same settings in the November general. Maricopa Board of Supervisors Chairman Bill Gates and Vice Chairman Bill Gates, that's no relation, Clint Hickman said in a statement, our voters deserve nothing less. Exactly, I totally agree. If there is something that is bothering our elections, then you need to actually, search these issues. At least, bare minimum, how about you just search these issues, and if the issue is nothing, then you can conclude with the investigation that you had. But you don't know that it's fake. You don't know that it's not real if you didn't investigate at the very beginning. Moving on with the article, after Maricopa County, which includes the capital of Phoenix and it's Arizona's most populous county, became an epicenter of voter irregularity issues stemming from the 2020 presidential election. It again faced controversy in last year's November 8th contest when tabulators in roughly 70 of 223 voting centers reportedly had trouble reading ballots. The problems were attributed to the printers that failed to produce significantly dark trimming marks to inform scanners of voter information, according to the Associated Press. So I just don't understand how this is even an issue, because I live in a state that's not heavily funded in that department, and I had absolutely no problem whatsoever voting in my election on November 8th. In response to a November request for information from Arizona's then Attorney General Mark Brnovich, Maricopa County said affected residents were offered alternative ways to vote and insisted the printer glitches did not prevent anyone from casting ballots. Still, some candidates had raised concerns. Exactly, because this should not even be an issue at all. Republican gubernatorial candidate Carrie Lake sued after the results showed that she lost her November contest to then Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs by roughly 17,000 votes. Yeah, 17,000 votes is nothing. Lake claimed election officials worked to disenfranchise voters and alleged hundreds of thousands of illegal ballots infested the election in Maricopa County. A judge rejected the lawsuit, which claimed a claim of intentional misconduct relating to malfunctioning ballot printers, but Lake is appealing. Abe Hamida, the Republican in the race for Arizona Attorney General, who is going to go to court to fight this November defeat, responded to the investigation news Friday, tweeting, Maricopa County, Pinal County, and what else? Democracy demands answers. Hobbs and others who were declared the winners of their respective contests were sworn into office this week. So that'll be interesting to see Hobbs get sworn in and then a couple weeks later get thrown back out because they're going to find that the printers were not working that day. How about if you just say, listen, since we have some questions about the printer, how about we just redo the election? Why, we can't do that? This November 8th coming up or any day. Just say a month before, hey, this day we're going to have another election. So everybody vote. Send out letters to everybody that voted in the first election and say, no, redo the vote. Is it that hard? No, it's not. Moving on to the next segment, we have a dozen takes. So, moving with the first article from CNN, 3 fire personnel are terminated and 2 other Memphis police officers were placed on leave over Tyree Nichols' deadly beating, officials say. Of course, they're framing it in that way, and they're not going to mention at all that if he did not fight and resist the police when he was being arrested, then this would not even be a situation whatsoever. Fallout from the deadly police beating of black motorist Tyree Nichols now includes the firing of 3 Memphis Fire Department personnel, in an announcement that a total of 7 police officers were placed on leave, as critics nationwide call for the police reform. Yes, listen, the thing is, we do need police reform, but not in the ways that you guys want to do it. The ways that is going to be appropriate to the police reform that is needed, is to get rid of the unions that are within the police force. The unions are what's causing the problem. If we can get rid of these unions, we can fire these police officers that we know are breaking the rules. If we can fire these police officers that are breaking the rules, then we will have no problems like the person that stood on George Floyd's back. Like the people that we had in this situation, overstepping their boundaries, yes, but also trying to do their job the best that they could possibly do. Moving on, 2 emergency medical technicians and a fire department lieutenant have been terminated over their response to Nichols' January 7th encounter with members of a now disbanded unit of the police department. Memphis Fire Chief Gina Sweat said Monday. Police pulled Nichols over in what they initially said was a suspicion of reckless driving. Officers yanked him out of the car and ran away after officers deployed pepper spray and a taser to try to make him lie prone. Okay, so this is the thing though. They're framing this in such a way that obviously you're going to sit here and say, this is bad. This is bad all around. You're not saying the full story of what happened. You're just skipping over the parts that he's running from police. You're just glancing over that. Oh, he was just running from police. That's not a big deal. Yes, it is a big deal. You're being arrested and you're running from the police officers. How about you just cooperate with the police officers? They wouldn't call in for backup. These police officers were black themselves, so it's not a racist thing. So what's your point? He had died 3 days later after his injuries, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has said. The beating has fueled broader public scrutiny of how United States police use force, especially against people of color. But the thing is that the police officers were black. So this has nothing to do with race, but of course CNN wants to make it about race. Emergency medical technicians Robert Long, Michael Singbridge, and Fire Lieutenant Michelle Whitaker has been fired, the fire department said Monday. An investigation concluded that 2 EMTs failed to conduct an adequate patient assessment of Mr. Nichols. After responding based on both the initial call in which they heard a person was pepper sprayed and information that they were told at the scene, Sweat said on a news release. Whitaker has remained in a fire truck, according to the chief's statement. The fire department said earlier this month that 2 EMTs had been suspended pending an internal investigation. The truck carrying the EMTs arrived at the second scene at about 8:41 p.m. to find Nichols on the ground, lending against the police. Wait a second. They have a typo in the CNN article. This is how much of a joke CNN is. Against a POLCIE vehicle, and called for an ambulance at 8:46 p.m. The fire department said the ambulance arrived at 8:55 p.m. and left with Nichols 13 minutes later, according to the fire department. Poll camera video released Friday that between the time of EMTs arrived and an ambulance arrived, first responders reportedly walked away from Nichols, with Nichols intermittently falling onto his side. After Monday, the police department announced that 7 officers were placed on leave the day after the beating, 2 more than previously announced. 5 of the officers, all of whom are black, were fired January 20th and then indicted last week on a second-degree murder and other charges. One officer said, "I hope they stomp his ass." So the thing is, Memphis police said Monday that a 16th and 17th officer were placed on leave with the other 5 on January 8th, and those 2 officers still are subjects to internal investigation. Police on Monday named one of the 2 officers, Preston Hampton, who is white, and said that he has been on administrative leave since the beginning of the investigation. Of course, as soon as they said, you have an involvement, you're done. Like, what? Like, what? Did you even do your investigation yet? Before firing people, you're just like, you have a name right here. You're fired. How about your name is coming up too? You're fired. And your name is you're fired. And no, your name, you're fired. Every single person's fired in this situation. You're not even going to do any investigation or see what the investigation even brings before firing people. You're just going to sit here and fire people right off the bat. CNN, you're stupid. Moving into the next article from CNN. We have 2 articles from each. So stupid. Moving into the next article from CNN, the next article from CNN. Why am I clicking on MSNBC? Hello? Okay, here it is. So, at least 10 people wounded in Lakeland, Florida, shooting, police say. The number of victims hurt in Monday's Lakeland, Florida shooting has increased to 7 after an additional victim self-transported to a hospital, according to Lakeland Police Chief Sam Taylor. Lakeland police have said that the incident was a targeted attack in a Lakeland neighborhood, CNN has reported. 2 of the 7 victims are listed in critical condition and have, quote, very serious injuries, including a man who was shot in the face and another shot in the abdomen. Investigators have spoken to the other 9 victims who are all expected to survive for their account on the shooting, said Taylor at a Tuesday morning briefing. Police have recovered a blue Nissan in Lakeland, matching the one used in the Monday afternoon drive-by shooting. Said Taylor. Investigations have a high level of confidence that they've located the vehicle used in the shooting, said the chief. The chief said that they're trying to expedite lab results from evidence found inside the vehicle. Firearms were among the items found inside the car. Inside 4 people were in the vehicle during the drive-by, and at least 2 were shooting outside the vehicle, said Taylor. No one is in custody at the time, but investigators have some, quote, very promising leads. And at least 1 subject identified, said the chief. Police are looking for at least 4 males who have been wearing facial coverings, according to Taylor, and urged members of the community to call with any information that could help them with the investigation. In a joint effort with Heartland Crime Stoppers, Florida, the department on Monday offered a $5,000 reward for anybody who provides information that could lead to the investigation and arrest of subjects connected to the shooting. Information may be reported at the tip line. At the crime scene, police found a quantity of marijuana, which indicates to police that there was a narcotic sales of marijuana going on at the time, Taylor said. Whether that is significant or related to this is unknown. Officials declined to provide additional information about the vehicle and its registered owner. Taylor stressed that the investigators are working around the clock to gather evidence that files warrants to arrest those responsible. This is something that doesn't happen in Lakeland. I've been here for 34 years, and I can tell you that I have never worked an event where this many people have been shot at one time ever, he said. Yeah, and I bet that's true because Florida is a very safe place to live. Next in the Doesn't Take segment, we actually have an MSNBC article. Polls reveal that the real reason Ron DeSantis is fighting the teaching of Black history. Listen, he said don't teach Black history because Black history is American history. How about you just teach American history? That's why. Moving on to the next article from MSNBC's, the M&M's spokes candy controversy is just a publicity stunt. Of course it is because MSNBC. Listen here, M&M's wants the attention. Of course they do. Why wouldn't they want all the attention that they're seeking from conservatives speaking out against them erasing women? Why wouldn't they want all the leftists complaining about the conservatives complaining about M&M's? Why wouldn't they want all this free press? Moving on with the article from MSNBC, we have, quote, an apparently non-candy spokesperson for M&M's released a statement Monday that the candy is taking an indefinite pause from using it in talking versions of its conflictions in ads. Obligatory referring to the polarizing reaction that last year's mascot refresh sparked on the right. In its ironic words of Mad Max Roktansky in the 2015 cinema masterpiece, Fury Road. That's B. For background, the statement released Monday, which introduces Maya Rudolph as a replacement and calls her a spokesperson America can agree on, is in supposed response to chum cheering from conservative outlets over the supposed quote woke ideology that the candy's parent company Mars Incorporated is imposing. Last year, Fox News host Tucker Carlson went on the tirade after green M&M's high heels were replaced with sneakers, of course, because the green M&M's is a girl, or I guess a transgender now, but I guess originally was a girl. Why are you gonna have the high heels taken off the girl to put sneakers on? How about the girl be a girl and a guy be a guy? Is that such a bad thing? M&M's will not be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappalling and totally gender fluid. Carlson said at the time, "When you are totally turned off, we've achieved equality." NBC News anchor reported Monday that more recently they've been a backlash to a campaign from M&M's that raised money to support women in creative industries and featured limited edition candy bags with the 3 female spokes candies. Yes, because you introduced you released a all girl M&M's bag, and you expect us not to get mad. If we release an all guy version of M&M's, you're gonna say, "Oh, the patriarchy is taking over." Well, I can't say that I pictured myself writing about the anthropomorphic candy when I woke up this morning. I can say that this announcement is a scam, a refuse crafted in marketing brainstorm as what's a pretty obvious lead up to a Super Bowl ad. Remember 2 years ago when Planters quote killed Mr. Peanut only to revive him during a Super Bowl commercial? I imagine that is a similar M&M's ad that will feature Rudolph, likely in an M&M costume, dead playing her frustrations to an off-camera director or some similar bit. TMZ reported that Rudolph has acknowledged it's all about a Super Bowl ad, just hours after the original tweet was posted. So of course, they're going to ruin the surprise. Well, MSNBC, we can't have anything nice. Like, can we just have a surprise about the Super Bowl ad without you ruining it and getting your scrubby little woke fingers all over the keyboard? How about you stop ruining the surprise for the rest of us? Like, damn. Oh, talk about a party pooper. Moving into the next article from Fox News. If this article would actually load, I would really appreciate that. Okay, so we have an article from Fox News here. Biden touts electric vehicle tax credits with picture of him in a luxury Hummer that doesn't even qualify. So, President Biden took to Twitter on Monday to promote his electric vehicle tax credit. However, while doing so, he attached a picture of himself in one that doesn't even qualify for it. This is according to him, the president. "On my watch, the great American road trip is going to be fully electrified," Biden tweeted with a picture of him in a GMC Hummer EV that ranges in cost from $87,000 to nearly $110,000, depending on the model. And now, through a tax credit, you can get $7,500 off a new electric vehicle, he continued. The Hummer EV is not even eligible for the credit since SUVs and trucks must not exceed a manufacturer's suggested retail price of $80,000, according to the Internal Revenue Service. The Hummer EV is so far more than the median American salary. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Americans' median weekly earnings were $1,085 per week in the fourth quarter of 2022. That figure would put the median American salary around $56,000 per year. When asked about the Biden promoting the pricey GMC Hummer EV that does not qualify for tax credits, a White House spokesperson told Fox News Digital that the president is committing to lowering electric vehicle costs, which has nothing to do with the question. President Biden is committing to lower the cost of electric vehicles for all Americans and bringing more affordable electric vehicles to the market, the spokesperson said. The president's Inflation Reduction Act lowers the cost for Americans, including for electric vehicles and energy at home, which avoids the question completely. The spokesperson also pointed to pictures of Biden driving a plug-in hybrid Jeep Wrangler and Ford F-150 Lightning, which qualifies for the credits. Well, yeah, since he posted these two things in the past, how about we just completely forget about what he's doing in the present? That's what they want us to think. Meanwhile, as history is promoting expensive electric vehicles during a September debut auto show, Biden boarded a Cadillac Nitro, an electric SUV with a starting price of more than $60,000. You know that I'm a car guy, Biden said at the event. I'm here because the auto show and the vehicles here give me so many reasons to be optimistic about the future. I really mean it. Just looking at them and driving them, they give me a sense of optimism. Although, I like the speed too. Of course, because electric vehicles have very high torque, so as soon as you step on the gas, you're going to go flying. Because it doesn't have to wait for the gas to actually burn up. Well, of course, if he can get these prices down to the same exact cost that it is for a regular gas-powered car, then people would still not buy it. Because now when you need to replace the battery, that's going to cost the same exact cost, if not half of the cost that you paid for the car. So if the battery dies in the car is totaled. That's exactly why people are not buying these electric cars. Moving on to the next article from Fox News, we have Size Matters. Biden challenges McCarthy. Show me your budget and I'll show you mine. Fox News. President Biden posed a challenge to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Monday amid rising tensions surrounding a debate over the rising of federal debt ceiling. Show me your budget and I'll show you mine. Biden made the remarks while responding to a question from CNN about his message to McCarthy would be during the upcoming meeting between them two, expected to be held on Wednesday at the White House. McCarthy said that the discussions would revolve around increasing the national debt ceiling, which Department Secretary Janet Yellen said had been reached on Thursday. Of course, because they just keep spending money willy-nilly. President Biden, I'll accept your invitation to sit down and discuss a reasonable debt ceiling increase to address irresponsible government spending, McCarthy tweeted Friday afternoon. I look forward to our meeting. On the same day, Biden confirmed to Politico that this decision would be about the debt. However, a White House official later insisted that the meeting would be a, quote, general one, and not about debt ceiling specifically. The official repeated the administration's previously stated position that the debt ceiling was not a negotiation. But it doesn't matter because is he going to veto the decision that Congress is going to come up with? No. Last week, Republican senators insisted Biden will negotiate on the debt ceiling, with Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, calling the president's anti-negotiation stance unreasonable and ridiculous. The growing United States debt stands at $31.4 trillion, while the federal government's annual budget is currently operating at $6.3 trillion, nearly $2 trillion more than what it spent annually prior to the coronavirus pandemic. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked earlier in the month about the debt ceiling negotiations and whether Biden is willing to cut any spending or would be willing to negotiate with Republicans who wanted to cut spending as part as a debt limit deal. Look, as you've heard us say before, we're not doing any negotiation over the debt ceiling, Jean-Pierre said. So they have to do a negotiation for the debt ceiling, because if they don't, then we're just going to be spending willy-nilly left and right. And we're going to get ourselves into a tricky, sticky situation that we're not going to ever be able to pay ourselves out of this debt. You need to pay off your debt. You need to make sure that you're spending within your means, or else you're never going to be able to get caught up in your whole entire life. Moving on to the next article from NPR, we have recent infighting raises a question. How conservative is the GOP? Well, considering that Kevin McCarthy is the most conservative House Speaker that we've had in 50 years, I'm pretty certain that it's kinda. Moving with the article, a few weeks ago, Americans, or the subset who would get excited about these things, were glued to C-SPAN, and the White House voted 15 times for a speaker. Well, I was glued to C-SPAN at the time. It was a show of deep but hard to describe division in the party. While the overwhelming majority of Republicans supported the eventual Speaker Kevin McCarthy, a fraction of 20 Republicans held out. Among the demands were the House not raise the debt ceiling without deep spending cuts. What set them apart? To some, the rebel Republicans were showing their ideological purity. By and large, the reason why Kevin McCarthy has this problem in in this conference is that these physical conservatives do not want to follow the Mitch McConnell Senate Republican strategy. American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Scullup told Fox Business they passed a nearly $2 trillion omnibus with winks and nods from Republicans because they do not have the stomach to reduce federal spending. But the speaker fight, as well as the national debt ceiling fight that had followed in the fight over leading the party, has raised some big questions about, well, are these Congress members so uniquely conservative? Charlie Sykes, editor-in-chief of the website The Bulwark, wrote a piece titled, "There is nothing conservative about negotiating our debt. I understand the whole idea of the physical conservatism, but they're basically saying, yes, let's push the country forward toward debt default. In what world is refusal to pay your credit cards considered a conservative act?" he told NPR. Okay, so this is where the line is crossed between you being just completely stupid and in reality. Now, the line is right here, clear as day. So this is exactly the reasoning that the conservatives within the Congress is not wanting to raise the debt ceiling. If we raise the debt ceiling, we're just going to be spending in other areas. Of course, paying our debt is a mandatory thing, along with 60% of our other mandatory spending. So almost 70% of our year-over-year spending is mandatory, and that's counting our debt. So only 30% is negotiating, and 11 to 15% of that is our military aid. But the thing is, we spent so much money when it comes to military because we just keep spending and spending and spending when it goes to the Ukraine. We're spending our budget for our military in Ukraine. So that should not be happening either. Likewise, the New York Times resilient right-leaning communist David Brooks and Brett Steffens discuss how the party has a rationalized conservative movement have left them feeling alienated. New York University professor and media critic Jay Rosen noticed how Republicans are frequently called conservatives. And the most destructive among them are the most conservative by reporters and editors who no longer know what they're using the words they habitably use. All of which is to say that the latest instances of GOP infighting has thus revised a years-long conversation about what it means to be conservative, and if that is even still the ideology at the center of the Republican Party. Trump, the, quote, maybe conservative. Debates over the party's ideology has been going on for a long time, and of course, but the conversation arguably got louder when Donald Trump ran for president in 2015. Of course, he's not a conservative, because if you are a conservative, you want to conserve values in the United States, and you want to conserve the rules and regulations that we've had, and you want to make the world a better place according to your conservative values. Being conservative is, not spending over the debt relief, not giving out money to people that are not putting back into the system, the bare minimum. I don't think that he is, Beck answered. I haven't heard him talk about the Constitution or small government. Okay, so I'm going to set the bar straight right here. Conservative does not necessarily mean that you want small government. I'm conservative and I do not want small government. I do, in fact, want the government to stop putting these vaccine requirements in place at certain parts. I do, in fact, want the government to stay out of our social media sphere, but I do want the government to come in and places like schools to tell teachers what they can and cannot teach, because that's exactly what I want the government to do. I also want the government to come into these social media platforms and enforce the laws that we have in the Constitution, which is our First Amendment right, is freedom of speech. These social media platforms are arguably the town square at which us, the people, use to go and use our voice and be heard. Not going to the park and talking with our microphone in our hand like we're on a box standing up, "Hey, heary, I have the news." No, you go on your social media platform like Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, and you go and you tell people that way. You're not going to, "Heary, this is the news from January 31st, at the time that I'm recording this." No, nobody does that anymore. Moving with the article, and a recent study shows just how much they did it. And it shows that Trump, who campaigned this past weekend in New Hampshire and South Carolina, in fact, changed how people defined conservatism. Researchers surveyed people who were particularly active in partisan politics, and they presented those activists with pairs of senators, and then asked the respondents to name which senator was more conservative or liberal. But you're acting like people remember names. I don't remember names of senators or congressmen or women. I don't. Even those with conservative voting records, as measured by Nominate, a widely used measure of members' ideologies based on their voting records, were seen as more moderate than their colleagues if they were also Trump critics. Georgetown's Hans Noel, a study co-author, adds that Trump reordered the party's priorities, taking focus away from traditionally conservative principles. This sort of America First nationalist, even racist kinds of appeals where he's like, let's get out of NAFTA and let's not let companies be woke. Some of these completely fly in the face of the free market economy, free trade, Republican coalition, Neal said. If not conservative, then what? So, is the post-Trump GOP conservative? By definition, yes. When political scientists have used Nominate voting data to try to objectively measure the party's conservatism, they have shown the entire GOP has grown more extreme in the recent years. So you're saying conservative is extreme now. So now you're saying that, what? Because we know what a woman is? You're saying that we're extreme? No, that is not extreme. Alex Jones is extreme. But while the people who voted against McCarthy are largely at the, quote, conservative end of the spectrum by this measure, it's not totally a clear picture. Reps Jim Jordan of Ohio and Marjorie Taylor Greene, McCarthy supporters, are more conservative here than Rep. Matt Gaetz of Florida, a vocal McCarthy opponent. And no matter what, McCarthy's score was still most definitely qualifies as conservative here. Perhaps more importantly, Nominate, for all of its elegance, doesn't really get how conservatism is defined. It picks how much people vote together, not what topics they're voting on or what they believe. If Congress starts voting on more bills about transgender issues and fewer about trade, the score won't reflect that. So we're back to definitions. For her part, Ashley Heck, executive director of the pro-Trump group America First Works, believed both that Trump's ideology is conservative and that he changed conservatism. It was experiencing the gap between the consultants and the people, and that permanently altered people's experiences overall, she said. I think conservatism is really, putting power back to the American people. Yes, it is. Putting power back to the American people, but also putting power back to the parents that have their kids in the schools, like what we're doing in Florida. And also, like what we're doing in Arizona, making sure that people know that their vote actually matters. And what we're doing in other places like Tennessee, where we put the power back into our therapists to give us the treatment that we actually need for mental disorders, which is gender dysphoria, more commonly known. On the note, Hayek adds that she sees this whole debate over whether the party is conservative as an inside the beltway conversation, something average Americans aren't concerned with. Of course, because nobody really pays attention this deep. That may be true. Charlie Sykes and David Brooks and Jay Raisin are two journalists that are an academic, the very picture of elites. But the debate still raises an important question. If today's conservatism is defined by Trump, what happens as his influence wanes? Michael Steve, former RNC chair, worries that the party has no ideology right now. It didn't adopt a new platform in 2020, and the Trump opponents like former Rep. Liz Cheney, Republican from Wyoming, is now out of power. We don't even have a platform. How do we define ourselves? We can't even tell you what we believe in, he said. Everybody is talking about Liz Cheney as conservative. Liz is conservative on a lot of things, but Liz got herself kicked out of the party. Listen, Liz is not conservative. Liz Cheney is not conservative at all. Liz Cheney is just a stupid person that does not agree with Trump. So instead of saying, no, I don't agree with Trump and just sticking to that, she wants to sit here and impeach Trump on things that he didn't even do. She wants to sit here and run the January 6th committee based off of lies that Democrats are giving her and feeding to her personally. So, and of course, nothing even happened from the January 6th committee that she was on. So, Liz Cheney, you're not conservative, because if you were conservative, you would look at the facts. As 2024 approaches, Sykes thinks that the people think of conservatism may at this point be more about a style than a substance. It's however you can play the most efficiently to the media wing of the Republican Party, who can anger the left, who promises to fight and inflict damage on the left more and more aggressively. That's their definition of a conservative. From the point of view, what is now means to be conservative might be described as simply opposing liberals. Yes, to the left, that's what the conservative person is. But to a conservative myself, I can tell you what a conservative is. A conservative is a person that believes in the fundamental right that we were God-given, aka our Constitution. Every single Constitution bears meaning, and we know that it has meaning, and we demand that it will withstand the test of time and continue to be serving us, the people, as it was intended in 1776. That is what it means to be conservative. You will stand by your value system at which the Constitution lays out. So county election supervisors in Florida are urging the state to throw out new vote-by-mail restrictions that are set to be rolled out next year, saying that the measures could present serious logistical insecurity issues. In a report sent to the Florida Department of State earlier this month, a working group of local election officials warned that the new identification requirements, which would require voters to provide a driver's license number or a partial security number on their ballots, would create significant election reporting delays and a slew of costs for local election offices, and could disenfranchise large numbers of voters. Okay, so who is this disenfranchising? Because as far as I know, you should not be voting if you do not have a license. Why? How do you, or an ID at least, or a social security number? If you don't have a social security number in the United States of America, you're not a United States citizen, so you should not be voting. One. Number two, if you don't even have an ID, then you're not even old enough to vote. So why are you even trying to vote in the elections if you don't have an ID? And three, if you don't have neither of those, then you do have a driver's license. And you do have a passport. You have some sort of ID. If you do not have an ID, then you can't even do basic things. You cannot even open up a bank account. So you cannot have a job. You can't drive without a driver's license. That's required by law for you to have at your person at all times. Number three, you can't get alcohol or cigarettes without your ID. So what are you doing in life? So it's like, what are you doing in life if you don't even have an ID? You can't do four major things that Americans or people in general do. Working being the major one. Anonymously, Florida supervisors of election view this legislative proposal as unnecessary and lacking adequate fashionability for imprisonment. They wrote in their report, Florida's new vote-by-mail measures as part of a sweeping legislation signed into law last year by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, provisions in the law, known as Senate Bill 524, are similar to vote-by-mail ID rules that went into effect in Texas last year. Watching what happened in Texas. Exactly, let's see. Local election officials in Texas say that those new ID requirements tripped up thousands of voters. Why? Because they didn't have an ID? Early on state's March primary, some counties are reporting preliminary rejection rates as high as 38%. After thousands of ballots were fixed or cured, about 12% of major mailed ballots statewide were ultimately rejected. Okay, so how about if you don't mail in your ballots at all? It's one time every 2 years or one time every 4 years if you only vote in the general primaries. How about you just take that 1 day off of work? 1 day per 4 years? You can't do that for your country? Oh, I can't. Which one voting rights advocate said was a catastrophic for democracy. In the state, rejection rates dropped further during the general election to 2.7%. So you're worried about 2.7% of the general population, which state officials says was a result of the education campaigns and ballot reassignments in some cases. How about you fix those issues and move on? Mark Earley, the Leon County Supervisor of Elections and current president of the Florida Supervisors of Elections Association, told NPR that the local officials watched Texas closely last year and are concerned about the rolling out of similar requirements in a state where significantly more people vote by mail. Why? Go to the voting place. Go to the ballot box. Drop off your ballot. If anything, Texas vote by mail program is largely limited to seniors and people who are out of town. Okay, if you're out of town that day, how about you don't vote? If you're disabled or in jail, first of all, are you living a normal life? If yes, then yes, you can vote. But if you're just sitting in your house all day long watching CNN or MSNBC or NPR or whatever have you, other media outlets, then no, you should not vote because you don't know what's happening in the real world. If you don't even have a job or you're in jail, why are you voting in our elections if you're in jail? You should not be voting in our elections. Why are you in jail? In Florida, though, all eligible voters are allowed to vote by mail. On average, about 1/3 of all ballots in the coast in Florida's elections are mail ballots, which Early says raises the stakes of any big chance of state ballots mail-in program. Officials worry votes can be disenfranchised if they provide ID numbers that are not in their voter file or if they do not write their ID information legibly. How about you print it? According to the report, state by state sent to the state election officials, they wrote that the most voters register while getting a driver's license, which means that their license is the number officials are most likely to have in their voter record. Most voters provide the last 4 digits of their social security number when asked to verify their identities using personally identifiable information, the report notes. As such, disparity exists between the information is in the voter file and what information voter provides can be verified. Supervisors do not have new tools to reconcile these differences. How about you give them the tools? Easy solution. Early said lawmakers also didn't include anything in the law that specifically addresses how election officials would allow voters to cure their ballot if there is any missing or incorrect ID information. He said, since about 1/3 of votes typically vote by mail, that could be a very significant proportion of the ballots in the state. Under Florida law, officials have only 2 days after Election Day to finish counting mail ballots, which Early said could be potentially disfranchised votes in upcoming elections. It's going to be very difficult to get all these vote-by-mail ballots counted, he said. Push for a new mail ballot ID rules, exactly what we need. Requiring identification numbers on mail ballots had been among model legislation pushed by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank in recent years. Zach Smith, a Heritage legal fellow, said that the provisions making voting by absentee ballot as safe and secure as possible. It is inherently less secure than voting in person, he said. Voting with an absentee ballot isn't taking place in a percent of election day with the election officials there to monitor it. But election officials in Florida, including Early, say their top issue at the moment is costs and risks associated with these new rules. Supervisors and elections are very concerned about every aspect of this. The timeless and the costs and the ability to just get our vote by mail tabulated in time. Early said, our chief recommendation is that this gets canceled. It needs to be rethought. Okay, so how about we change those things? Because this is something that we can negotiate on. How about you take your red marker and say, how about this be changed? How about this be changed? How about this be changed? We go through and we have this reconstructed by next November or next August, so we have some time to actually implement this law. How about we do that? But we don't want to communicate what we don't like and what we like about laws. This is exactly why we're in America, so we can negotiate laws before we actually bring them on the House floor to vote on them. With that being said, that is the answer to this very question. And with that also ultimately being said, that's going to be today's show. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. And if you did enjoy the show, please like and subscribe down below and leave a rating on all of the audio platforms that you do listen on. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Bye. Hey, were you really going to click off this video before leaving a like and subscribing down below? Wow, so rude.